Hello, this is Josh Belk with the Belk on Business podcast. I appreciate you taking a few moments to listen in today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about finding insight. So finding insight, and I think for probably most of you know, when we talk about insight, we're talking about getting a deeper level of understanding. And I'm going to primarily kind of try to come at this from a couple different directions. So getting a deeper understanding of ourselves and then getting a deeper understanding of whatever problem that we're facing, that we're trying to solve. And I think for us to be able to become good problem solvers, we need to have good insight into ourselves before we can get good insight into the problem. So kind of understanding how we think, how we operate, so we can go through and be able to think through, get a deeper level of understanding of a problem so we can come up with effective and good solutions. So I'm going to mention just, I think, 5 different points here as it relates to finding insight. And hopefully this is, I don't know how overly practical this is going to be. I think it's going to be a little bit more theoretical than practical, but hopefully you'll still find some value and some help in this particular talk. So finding insight. How do we find insight? And because ultimately what we're trying to do is make steps toward reaching our goals. And of course, we talk about this a lot. A lot of people talk about finding our goals, finding our vision, understanding what that is, and taking the appropriate steps to getting us there. So I think we need to start right there. So the first thing that we need to do when we're talking about getting a deeper level of understanding or finding insight is to keep the end in mind. So start with that vision, start with that end. Stephen Covey, of course, really talks heavily about beginning with the end in mind. And I think that's extremely important. What direction are we trying to go, both personally and then also professionally? And so where are we ultimately trying to go? What are our goals? I think when we talk about personally, we need to have short-term, we need to have midterm and long-term goals for ourselves, for our team members, as well as in our businesses. So we need to start there. And so beginning with that end in mind, where are we trying to go? What direction are we heading? So starting with our vision, number one. Number two, we really need to stay out of the weeds. Sometimes we can end up with paralysis by analysis. So we spend so much time trying to figure things out that we never take the time to step back. And I know a lot of times we'll hear business professionals talking about working on our business instead of working in our business, and I think it's extremely important that we work in our business, and then but I think it's even extremely important that we work on ourselves. And but many times we need to be able to take a step back, and sometimes, and I'll mention this a little bit later on, we need to have other people to kind of help us take that step back. But finding insight and getting that deeper level of understanding, we don't want to get to the point of getting into that paralysis by analysis mode. So we spend so much time studying that we never take a step back and really begin to apply what it is that we are learning to be able to get the insight that we need into ourselves so we can become good problem solvers and ultimately reach the goal for ourselves and for our businesses. So staying out of the weeds. And I think a real good way of doing that, of staying out of the weeds, is stepping out of our comfort zone. And I'll kind of blend that in here to number 3, which is to face our fears. So to face our fears. The biggest hurdle, the biggest force of resistance that we will have individually and professionally is whatever it is that brings us fear. I think years ago, I think for most people, one of their top fears is that of public speaking. When I was in junior high school, we had a science fair project, and part of that science fair project, we had a presentation. We also had a paper that we had to write, and so after we wrote the paper and we put our presentation together, we had this science fair. So people from the community would come in, of course our parents would come in, and our peers would kind of walk around and look at our projects and flip through and look at our paper. But part of that process was having some local college kids come in, and they would grade our presentation. So we had to stand there, we had to talk about our paper, we had to talk about our presentation. And I was so scared as a junior hire of humiliation, of being laughed at, of getting a bad grade, that I literally hid under the bleachers so I would not have to give my presentation. I remember hiding under the bleachers and hearing over the intercom them calling my name to come and give my presentation. And I was literally so scared, I was scared stiff, and I hid to not have to face my fears. And for years I was that way. Through high school, even into college, the fear of public speaking was absolutely, it was something that was crippling me. And of course, I've worked through that. Now I speak publicly, and give me a microphone and a topic, and I'll roll. I kind of gotten over that fear, and have had the opportunity to speak in front of larger groups, and I have no fear of doing so now. But I had to face my fears. I had to get out of my comfort zone. But at some point, and I think for all of us, we have to understand what our fears are, understanding why we are fearful. And so I had a fear of public speaking, as many people do, and most of the time that fear just comes from we just don't want to be humiliated. And so we have to step out of our comfort zone to be able to get the insight that we need into ourselves, and then if we're dealing with a problem, for that as well. So number 3, facing our fears. Number 4, don't overindulge in overthinking. And so I mentioned this before, but don't spend so much time thinking about the problem that we can't come up with effective solutions. So ultimately, we want to get enough information to be able to analyze the situation, to come up with possible solutions, figure out what the best solution is, and then move forward with that solution. And maybe whatever that second possible solution is kind of becomes our fallback plan or our contingency plan. So first, starting with our vision. Secondly, staying out of the weeds. Thirdly, facing our fears. Fourth, don't overindulge in overthinking. And then lastly, who or what can help us be able to bring clarity or what it is that we can bring in to ultimately achieve our results. So many times when we're trying to find insight into ourselves, we need to bring other people along with us to kind of help us understand what are our fears, how do we think, and so sometimes it becomes very difficult to take that step back to look at ourselves. So it may be a business coach, it may be a life coach, it may be a mastermind community that we're in that we can go to and come to. Hey, this is what I'm thinking about. This is my thinking process. Can you kind of help bring some clarity? Is there something I'm missing? Is there something that you've seeing in me that is prohibiting me from getting to where I want to go? And sometimes, I mean, technology, we can bring different elements of that into ourselves and into our business as well to help us be able to problem solve. But I think ultimately it's going to be people, individuals that we can bring alongside us that can help look at us to help us to be able to get that deeper level of understanding, get the insight that we need into ourselves and also into our businesses, into the problems that we're trying to solve, and kind of bounce ideas off of them so we can receive the clarity that we need to be able to move forward so we can get closer to our goals. Hopefully this was of some help. Once again, this is Josh Belk with the Belk on Business podcast. Thank you once again for listening. If you do find value in this podcast, I would encourage you to subscribe on whatever platform works best for you. Have a wonderful day.